Welcome to Inform TV. I'm Alan Repke, Alexandria, Minnesota. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the election in Wisconsin. We're going to talk some more about the need for labor unions in outstate Minnesota and rural America and around the country, as far as what are we doing for the lower 40% of the population that work a 40-hour week yet are struggling with their homes. They're wondering about their retirement, just a whole host of things. A huge percentage of the population of America looks at, and as Tip O'Neill always said, politics is always local, economics are always local. And first we're going to start a little bit. I thought when people are watching our program on unions and the fact we're going to have a meeting in here in Alexandria on the 20th at Fat Daddy's, and we welcome the general public as well as workers around the state that they want to come to Fat Daddy's here in Alexandria at 11 o'clock. We'll have the people from the Christian Labor Association to talk to you, and then we'll have an additional 2 meetings at 1 o'clock there for the Donnelly workers that need to get organized, and once again at 4 o'clock, because it's a 24/7 operation, 7 days a week. So we have to have a schedule that fits all workers, or they can contact me at work, because I think they all understand they've got to do something if they're going to have a fair living wage working at Donnelly and address their retirement and all the things involved in their family and their life going forward. There's plenty of room for higher wages. There's no question in my mind about that. And when we start looking at the numbers, all the workers there that are being left out of the pie, so to speak, will understand that. But so the 20th of June here in Alexandria, 11 in the morning, 1 and 4. But I want to get back to the fact of the election a little bit in Wisconsin and give you a little idea of how Inform TV I'm going to track forward of getting a chance for you to understand what must go on if we're going to address the mess. Somebody has to start analyzing the situation. We just can't continue to listen to the same politicians, the same 6 TV networks, and think we're going to solve the problem, people. Because we've got accounting issues, we've got information issues, and it just goes on and on. But anyway, first of all, anybody that's watched the program Inform TV here in the past understands I was very pro Governor Wilson there in Wisconsin, and I firmly believed that the people of Wisconsin had to show their fellow Wisconsinites as well as the country and the world that in the U.S. we're not a parliamentary type government like they are in Europe and other socialist countries around the world. We elect a government for an administration and a president for 4 years. Most governors around the country are elected for 4 years, which Wilson was. And we as citizens must live with that, good, bad, or otherwise. The impeachment process, so to speak, with Clinton, what did it prove? Nothing. Really, going back to Watergate, was all said and done, what did it prove throwing Nixon out early? We just got stuck with Jimmy Carter and Ford. And we have to understand that first of all, when the political parties let the general population down of getting people that aren't doing their job, in the case of Nixon, and did questionable items such as Clinton did. I did not have sex with that woman, so to speak. And here we go to Wisconsin, where we have a governor that governed. He just looked at the numbers and looked at these unions and said, we've got to change things. And when I talk that way, I'm sure my critics out there, hey, he's talking about labor unions for common workers. but he supports what Wilson did. Why do I do that? As I just said, when we elect somebody, whether the Democrat or Republican, whether I like them or you like them, we should be stuck with it. And then the population comes out of the bars and restaurants and bed to vote to see that they have better government in the future. In a democracy, we deserve what we elected. But in the case of Wilson, he was governing under sound principles and starting to make these cuts and starting to get special interest groups under control. And hopefully it moves forward across the country and around the world. Hurrah, Governor Wilson. Job well done, and hurrah to anybody in Wisconsin that happens to see that of there in the Alexandria Lakes area as we record this the 7th of June 2012. That you understand, we respect you guys for what you did, putting Wilson back into place, and I challenge him to govern, continue to lead. Yet at the same time, my critics will say, well, you talk that way, but now you want to unionize? I want to unionize or get something started, and I don't know any other way to do it. So in the case of Donnelly workers, Walmart workers, we have to unionize these people. But in the case of public employees, one of the things that is breaking the system, broke General Motors, is pension plans. And I, as a businessman and a capitalist, who I told you before in the last program, I organized the pea and sweet corn growers in southern Minnesota, put a bargaining unit together, passed legislation, and negotiated a fair contract with Green Giant for a number of years. And at the same time, I was involved in sugar legislation on a national basis to see that we had a fair policy, the only policy that stood the test of times without subsidies. And yet at the same time sat on the board of directors down there, and in fact I looked at something on cooperatives. I haven't had a chance to double back on it, but Southern Minnesota Beet Sugar Cooperative was a big business when I was there for 9 years as a board member as well as executive committee and their head lobbyist. We had labor unions. When Chuck Hanton and I sat down with Tip O'Neill, we said it's going to help our farm communities, it's going to help our small businesses, it's going to help the John Deeres, the Senex, Land O'Lakes, the suppliers of farmers, and we all can live taking a fair piece of the pie. And that's what sugar legislation proved. Yet we dealt with the union people, and we told Tip O'Neill that if society is going to benefit, we have to have good paying jobs. We can't do like what's going on in Walmart, what's going on with Donnelly manufacturing, where they're just lowballing everybody. We have to address that, especially as good citizens and especially as Christians. And I don't believe in these pension plans. In fact, I worked for 9 years with a pension plan. The numbers with Southern Minnesota Beet Sugar go up for some of our management as well as the labor unions there. And at the time, things were booming and inflating, and I was thinking, we put the plan together 6 months later, something like that. We don't have to fund it. I said, what do you mean we don't have to fund it? Well, we've got all this money coming in. Yeah, but if it's going to be a sound pension plan, we're going to have to continue to fund it. No, we're not going to do that. And we didn't. And the same thing now, and I presume that pension plan is okay, but there's still a huge liability as a business gets older. And we see the mess with General Motors, and our public employees unions have not focused on that. Our teachers unions have not focused on that, and that is wrong, and that's why I salute Wilson. The reality is, when we start in our working career, we should look at making these 401k plans, pension plans, where there's some tax-free dollars put away, and they stay there. They're not to be pulled out when you move from job to job. You can move it into new retirement plan, but you don't. It's not a safety net. It's not a savings plan. It's not your money. If you want it to be your money, pay tax on it. That's the issue. And so when I talk to Donnelly workers and talk to people around the state and the churches, what are we doing for low-income workers that work and provide an incredible service? In fact, one of the things that recently was in the news about Mark Zuckerman, they called it the Mech honeymoon. They were eating in Europe at a McDonald's. And Kramer, Mad Money Kramer on CNBC, he says his favorite food is the Egg McMuffin. Why do we need to see that our McDonald's workers in our communities around the Minnesota work in less than a living wage, to see that successful multimillionaires can go in there and buy dirt cheap without seeing that those workers get a fair shake? You see where I'm coming from? And these pensions, when I talk to the Donnelly workers, I'm not telling them about a pension. I'm just talking about getting a fair wage, and they're not getting that. And some of the games, the management and staff there play with the common workers, it's an ownership, it's ridiculous. And we have to see, and that's what this meeting will be about on the 20th. If you come in at 11 o'clock from the general public or an outstate, you'll see what are we going to do to see that in our modern democracy there is a fair profit-sharing plan, that the ownership and the sales staff and the engineers and those that think they're important all go in like a bunch of pigs and take everything. In a democracy, your 40 hours is very important, just like the 40 hours that the other guy puts in. If he puts in 16, so be it. He's going to get some more money. But the reality is none of those guys put 16 hours a day in year-round. And if they do, they can do their job for 8 hours, and then they can come out and do on the line at the press, so to speak, for another 8, because, you know, they're the working fools of the world and just deserve it all. Bull. That's not the case. And when we look at some of the things going on in the news besides the labor issue, I looked at some very interesting things as far as what was in the news. We just passed the stadium. And one of the things that, as you watched here, I was very critical of the fact that the legislature and the governor brought in more gambling into the neighborhoods. In other words, they're going to have these electronic pull tabs in all the bars or some of the bars, and compete against the charitable gambling that's going on. And right now and say we've got it all under control. And some of you people who watch this program probably watch Between the Lines. Travis there had one of the senators on who was against the 2 amendments that I'm very in favor of, that we all should vote yes on. But she was talking about these pull tabs. Well, we think there are these electronic pull tabs. We think they're going to be enough to fund this massive liability on this new stadium for these billionaires and millionaire players. But they don't know. And their only alternative is to put some tax, I guess, on trinkets that they sell, jerseys and that kind of thing. But they don't know if that's enough either. And yet here's the thing in the news that I want you to think about and discuss and call your legislature on and call the Gambling Commission. And that was this week we saw that Canterbury Park and the Mystic Lake group there at Prior Lake got together and said they've cut a deal where the Indians don't want any racinos, and they're going to pay the Canterbury Park people $75 million over the next 10 years, provided they don't lobby for any racino. People, here's the whole thing that I'm looking at. First and foremost, the chairman of the board, the Sampson family, we're both, Kurt and I are both from the same hometown. And we were both raised as products of the community. Both Kurt and I were treated extremely well with the people in Hector, Minnesota. And were nourished by them, as well as the old chicken plucker who looks at himself as a Fairfax individual. But it was an incredible community to be nurtured in. And Sampson, incredibly successful in our community and financial, incredible example of what communities should do to stimulate good people in their communities so they don't leave. Kurt Sampson is the star on that. So is Mike Sweiss, the bifold guy, door guy, and myself. That when it's all said and done, no one in the community would do that, but when you looked at what I was involved in sugar legislation and some of the ramifications there, I'll match their benefits to the overall area, even though we're all three did a lot for our community and environment. But in this case, the Sampson family should not be allowed to be coercing with the tribes. It's not that they're not wonderful people. It's the fact that we people may need that revenue source in the very near future as this economy has to reboot itself and deflate and a number of things. It is outrageous that our governor and your legislators and mine are not coming to that gambling commission that supposedly has the only final say. Now, shouldn't the governor have final say on this? Shouldn't the legislature have final say? We need to see that that doesn't go through. That we want to start bringing real competition back into the marketplace. And there's ramifications. I'll show you one of the ramifications that affects me personally. In my quest to get this little TV gig off, I've approached Canterbury and said, I want to put some of your races on an entertainment basis on my coming channel here in the Alexandria Lakes area for selective TV and anybody that gets free TV. And I'm getting closer to that all the time. But they wouldn't give me exclusive rights. And I said, I need exclusive rights. If I get something meaningful going, you or my competition will just outbid me as the low guy in a totem pole. And part of that feedback that I didn't get from them when I keep emailing them is the fact that here we got these casinos that have made tons of money without taking care of all Native Americans. You just had to be the right tribe member and with the right bloodline to benefit big time. But now they want to work with Canterbury on controlling racing as well. And I think it's time we see that these racinos start more gambling, have the opportunity from a standpoint of competing and get these additional gambling out of our neighborhood, and to see in general that we as Minnesota start seeing that there's competition back in the marketplace, and that our leaders start saying, what are we doing for the average citizen? Going back to the Glass-Steagall rules of the 20s and 30s, and these big, rich, successful people can continue expanding their own base, but there is and will be, nor should be, any coercion with their rich buddies like's going on right now here in the state of Minnesota. And by the way, I also invited the governor, but I was, you got to be a big, long notice, and we're just common people. The governor, no important person is going to come out and talk to common people. And but I wanted the governor to talk, or some of our elected officials, at this labor meeting over the luncheon deal. You might have to listen to me a little bit on some subjects, or if I can get somebody else to come in by the 20th. And that is, why isn't Minnesota cleaning up our own housing mortgage mess? There's an incredible opportunity right now here, people, where the governor and the legislature in this off session and some of these people that are leaving, why aren't we having hearings about tapping some of this cheap money, not as a big liability to the state of Minnesota, but as a way to get our mortgage mess under control and be the first state in the union that does what? That's required under capitalism and was always required until 2008 and this meltdown of this mortgage mess, and that was what? To see that banks and lending institutions must keep their bad assets on the books and value those assets at market value. We right now should be the first state to force every financial institution in the state of Minnesota to get those house loans on the books at present market value. And then start talking with these lenders and with the folks in Washington to use Minnesota as a model of how can the state tap some of this money, let these banks that CNBC just said today they have excess capital, start using that capital to write down these bad loans and start being the leader in the state as far as understanding what is affordable housing. What did we find in this whole housing mess, people? Affordable housing on these old houses is not a 30-year mortgage. The only way you're going to have a 30-year mortgage with all these old houses around Minnesota and the Dakotas here in rural areas is the fact you break that loan down to a maximum of 15 years, like it should have never went over in the first place. So people have to pay 20% down. The cost of that house comes down to a reasonable level so they can fix it up the way it should be fixed up, rather than have this 30-year mortgage around their neck and can't go out to a movie, can't go to the bar, can't go to Main Street in the communities around the state or the mall. People are, the business community is trying to make me look at the bad guy. The bad guy is these people that were in this real estate. And the bars and the businesses, it's time we wake up to the fact that if you want a community of growth in Brainerd, in Wilmer, in Marshall, in Mankato, we as a state of Minnesota have to address this incredible housing mess that's still over our head. And the other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about today was the fact that the Congressional Budget Office, once again, there was some information on the news just like I told you here a couple weeks ago, the CBO numbers show that contrary to what Greenspan was talking to Congress about, or I think it was a Senate hearing today, this 7th of June, about how we got to address this financial cliff. People, the CBO numbers show we have to let it happen. We have to get our act together. We have to bring in, like Alan Repke's been talking here, we have to bring that revenue source in of ending those Bush tax cuts and ending them now. We have to make additional cuts that are already triggered in. We have to be tough on these defense contractors and some of these military wages as well. We've got all these unemployed people living on unemployment insurance. Put them in the Army, reinstate the draft, if that's what it takes to protect the people and the people of the world, and get that defense cost down dramatically and nationalize it if we have to, just like was done in World War II to protect the people. But here's what one of the reports said. But while shocking the economy in the short term, and we will go into somewhat of a recession, and we will start deflating some of these prices so we can be competitive with the rest of the world. The steps would have long-term benefits, and the only way to shrink this national debt and to address our budget deficits. Those numbers I showed you a couple weeks ago, if you go and look at that report from the CBO, clearly shows that we can easily stand it. Now, the money people that are filling their pockets, it hurts their ability to make 10, 100 times, 1,000 times more per year than the rest of it. So be it. Tough. And the other thing that I want to touch on today is the fact that we have to understand what's going on in Europe and the reality, people, here, to allow that euro or our government to be funding swaps to see Greece, Spain, Italy are not governing under sound economics, that our government is not governing under sound economics, is outrageous. The euro is still a strong currency. It started coming down. It still is trading at 125 to the dollar. People, that thing should be trading at 70 to 80 cents on our dollar. That's a garbage currency, and it's time we let the people in Europe take the beating. And so be it, as they say. And the other thing, we talked about here is Facebook. And we still have these brokerage houses and these rich people talking about they want to sue. The NASDAQ doesn't have enough money set aside to take care of them. Now, this morning, I think I saw it was down to 26 bucks. So be it. Let the marketplace work. And the interesting issue with these banks, and we just got to let things play out. And yet at the same time, we hear these market advisors saying, buy stocks regardless of price. Why? Because they're paying a 3 or 4% dividend. What if those stocks drop dramatically? And I'm warning you, the potential for a massive stock drop before we get our house together is definitely there. In fact, one guy asked me, I've had a few people in town here say, hey, I saw you on TV, I like your program. So there's a couple people out there that watch this for sure. And the one guy asked me, what would you do with your money? How would you protect yourself if you had some money? Well, I said, I'd go to Canada fishing this summer, like Kurt Sampson, you take me up to their former corporate retreat every year, and and I would go up Canada fishing this year. I would open an account under Canadian dollars, and I would put a safety net, a reasonable safety net. It's a venture, in a savings account in a Canadian bank, and so you would have, I think, probably the safest currency, the unspoken currency, is the Canadian dollar. Personally, I think we should annex Canada if we're going to let all those jobs up there. Otherwise, we should start pulling some of that money out there. But the reality, I'd go up there, I'd open a Canadian savings account, and if I had a reasonable amount of money, if say you had $40,000 in a savings account here, I'd probably put 20 of it in a Canadian currency, convert it to a Canadian currency, and in a Canadian bank. And if I was blessed with the big money I used to have, I'd probably put some Canadian $100 bills in a safety deposit box up there. I think that's the best hedge. I'm not saying we're doing it with any big party money, but I was asked what I would do if I was still a man of means, and hopefully I'll get that way. We get the Bremer Bank or some of these banks that claim to be public or employee owned or our foundation home. They should be advertising here as well as other businesses, and use this as a safety net. That Canadian bank, the Canadian government, that Canadian currency, I firmly believe, is a alternative safety net to what's going on in the world today. And remember, on June 20th at 11 o'clock at Fat Daddy's in Alexandria, email me at al@informedtv.com, al@informedtv.com. telling me if you're going to come. Even if you're not going to eat there, but I recommend you stay and eat at the bar, or if we get enough people, we can maybe get some kind of buffet set up for you. But if you're coming to that 11 o'clock meeting, whether you're having lunch or not, can email me and tell me that you're coming so I can tell the people at Fat Daddy's what to expect. Thanks for listening to Inform TV, and remember, the 20th of June at Fat Daddy's. I want to see you there at 11 o'clock. We'll talk issues. Thanks.